Sir Christopher Michael Wren, ʻrɛn, PRS, is one of the most highly acclaimed English architects in history. He was accorded responsibility for rebuilding 52 churches in the City of London after the Great Fire in 1666, including his masterpiece, St. Paul's Cathedral, on Ludgate Hill, completed in 1710. The principal creative responsibility for a number of the churches is now more commonly attributed to others in his office, especially Nicholas Hawksmoor. Other notable buildings by Wren include the Royal Naval College, Greenwich, and the south front of Hampton Court Palace. The Wren Building, the main building at the College of William and Mary, is attributed to Wren. It is the oldest academic building in continuous use in the United States. Educated in Latin and Aristotelian physics at the University of Oxford, Wren was a notable anatomist, astronomer, geometer, and mathematician-physicist, as well as an architect. He was a founder of the Royal Society, and his scientific work was highly regarded by Isaac Newton and Blaise Pascal. Life and works. Wren was born in East Knoyle in Wiltshire, the only surviving son of Christopher Wren Sr. and Mary Cox, the only child of the Wiltshire squire Robert Cox from Fonthill Bishop. Christopher Sr. was at that time the rector of East Knoyle and later Dean of Windsor. It was while they were living at East Knoyle that all their children were born. Mary, Catherine, and Susan were all born by 1628, but then several children were born who died within a few weeks of their birth. Their son Christopher was born in 1632. Then, 2 years later, another daughter named Elizabeth was born. Mary must have died shortly after the birth of Elizabeth, although there does not appear to be any surviving record of the date. Through Mary Cox, however, the family became well off financially for, as the only heir, she had inherited her father's estate. As a child, Wren seemed consumptive. Although a sickly child, he would survive into robust old age. He was first taught at home by a private tutor and his father. After his father's royal appointment as Dean of Windsor in March 1635, his family spent part of each year there. But little is known about Wren's life at Windsor. He spent his first 8 years at East Knoyle and was educated by the Rev. William Shepherd, a local clergyman. Little is known of Wren's schooling thereafter. During dangerous times when his father's royal associations would have required the family to keep a very low profile from the ruling parliamentary authorities. It was a tough time in his life, but one which would go on to have a significant impact upon his later works. The story that he was at Westminster School between 1641 and 1646 is substantiated only by Parentalia, the biography compiled by his son, a fourth Christopher, which places him there for some short time before going up to Oxford. However, it is entirely consistent with Headmaster Dr. Busby's well-documented practice of educating the sons of impoverished royalists and Puritans alike, irrespective of current politics or his own position. Some of Wren's youthful exercises preserved or recorded showed that he received a thorough grounding in Latin and also learned to draw. According to Parentalia, he was initiated in the principles of mathematics by Dr. William Holder, who married Wren's elder sister Susan in 1643. His drawing was put to academic use in providing many of the anatomical drawings for the anatomy textbook of the brain, Cerebri Anatoma, published by Thomas Willis, which coined the term neurology. During this time period, Wren manifested an interest in the design and construction of mechanical instruments. It was probably through Holder that Wren met Sir Charles Scarborough, whom Wren assisted in his anatomical studies. On 25 June 1650, Wren entered Wadham College, Oxford, where he studied Latin and the works of Aristotle. It is anachronistic to imagine that he received scientific training in the modern sense. However, Wren became closely associated with John Wilkins, the warden of Wadham. The Wilkins Circle was a group whose activities led to the formation of the Royal Society, comprising a number of distinguished mathematicians, creative workers and experimental philosophers. This connection probably influenced Wren's studies of science and mathematics at Oxford. He graduated B.A. in 1651, and 2 years later received M.A. 1653 to 1664, receiving his M.A. in 1653. Wren was elected a Fellow of All Souls College in the same year and began an active period of research and experiment in Oxford. His days as a Fellow of All Souls ended when Wren was appointed Professor of Astronomy at Gresham College, London in 1657. He was provided with a set of rooms and a stipend and was required to give weekly lectures in both Latin and English to all who wished to attend. Admission was free. Wren took up this new work with enthusiasm. He continued to meet the men with whom he had frequent discussions in Oxford. They attended his London lectures and in 1660, initiated formal weekly meetings. It was from these meetings that the Royal Society, England's premier scientific body, was to develop. He undoubtedly played a major role in the early life of what would become the Royal Society, his great breadth of expertise in so many different subjects helping in the exchange of ideas between the various scientists. In fact, the report on one of these meetings reads, Memorandum November 28, 1660. These persons following, according to the usual custom of most of them, met together at Gresham College to hear Mr. Wren's lecture, viz. the Lord Brouncker, Mr. Boyle, Mr. Bruce, Sir Robert Moray, Sir Paul Neal, Dr. Wilkins, Dr. Goddard, Dr. Petty, Mr. Ball, Mr. Rook, Mr. Wren, Mr. Hill. And after the lecture was ended they did, according to the usual manner, withdraw for mutual converse. In 1662, they proposed a society for the promotion of physico-mathematical experimental learning. This body received its royal charter from Charles II, and the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge was formed. In addition to being a founder member of the Society, Wren was president of the Royal Society from 1680 to 1682. In 1661, Wren was elected civilian professor of astronomy at Oxford, and in 1669 he was appointed surveyor of works to Charles II. From 1661 until 1668 Wren's life was based in Oxford. Although his attendance at meetings of the Royal Society meant that he had to make occasional trips to London, the main sources for Wren's scientific achievements are the records of the Royal Society. His scientific works ranged from astronomy, optics, the problem of finding longitude at sea, cosmology, mechanics, microscopy, surveying, medicine and meteorology. He observed, measured, dissected, built models and employed, invented and improved a variety of instruments. 1665 to 1723. It was probably around this time that Wren was drawn into redesigning a battered St. Paul's Cathedral. Making a trip to Paris in 1665, Wren studied the architecture, which had reached a climax of creativity, and perused the drawings of Bernini, the great Italian sculptor and architect, who himself was visiting Paris at the time. Returning from Paris, he made his first design for St. Paul's. A week later, however, the Great Fire destroyed two-thirds of the city. Wren submitted his plans for rebuilding the city to King Charles II, although they were never adopted. With his appointment as King's Surveyor of Works in 1669, he had a presence in the general process of rebuilding the city, but was not directly involved with the rebuilding of houses or companies' halls. Wren was personally responsible for the rebuilding of 51 churches. However, it is not necessarily true to say that each of them represented his own fully developed design. Wren was knighted the 14th of November 1673. This honor was bestowed on him after his resignation from the civilian chair in Oxford, by which time he had already begun to make his mark as an architect, both in services to the Crown and in playing an important part in rebuilding London after the Great Fire. Additionally, he was sufficiently active in public affairs to be returned as Member of Parliament for Old Windsor in 1680, 1689 and 1690, but did not take his seat. By 1669 Wren's career was well established, and it may have been his appointment as surveyor of the king's works in early 1669 that persuaded him that he could finally afford to take a wife. In 1669 the 37-year-old Wren married his childhood neighbour, the 33-year-old Faith Coghill, daughter of Sir John Coghill of Bletchington. Little is known of Faith's life or demeanour, but a love letter from Wren survives, which reads, in part, "I have sent your watch at last and envy the felicity of it, that it should be soe near your side and soe often enjoy your eye. But have a care for it, for I have put such a spell into it, that every beating of the balance will tell you, 'tis the pulse of my heart, which labours as much to serve you and more truly than the watch, for the watch I believe will sometimes lie, and sometimes be idle and unwilling. But as for me you may be confident I shall never." This brief marriage produced 2 children. Gilbert, born October 1672, who suffered from convulsions and died at about 18 months old, and Christopher, born February 1675. The younger Christopher was trained by his father to be an architect. It was this Christopher that supervised the topping out ceremony of St. Paul's in 1710 and wrote the famous Parentalia, or Memoirs of the Family of the Wrens. Faith Wren died of smallpox on the 3rd of September 1675. She was buried in the chancel of St. Martin in the Fields beside the infant Gilbert. A few days later Wren's mother-in-law, Lady Coghill, arrived to take the infant Christopher back with her to Oxfordshire to raise. In 1677, 17 months after the death of his first wife, Wren remarried, this time to Jane Fitzwilliam, daughter of William Fitzwilliam, 2nd Baron Fitzwilliam, and his wife Jane Perry, the daughter of a prosperous London merchant. She was a mystery to Wren's friends and companions. Robert Hooke, who often saw Wren 2 or 3 times every week, had, as he recorded in his diary, never even heard of her, and was not to meet her till 6 weeks after the marriage. As with the first marriage, this too produced 2 children, a daughter Jane, and a son William, poor Billy, born June 1679, who was developmentally delayed. Like the first, this second marriage was also brief. Jane Wren died of tuberculosis in September 1680. She was buried alongside Faith and Gilbert in the chancel of St. Martin in the Fields. Wren was never to marry again. He lived to be over 90 years old, and of those years was married only 9. Bletchington was the home of Wren's brother-in-law William Holder, who was rector of the local church. Holder had been a Fellow of Pembroke College, Oxford. An intellectual of considerable ability, he is said to have been the figure who introduced Wren to arithmetic and geometry. Wren's later life was not without criticisms and attacks on his competence and his taste. In 1712, the letter concerning design of Anthony Ashley Cooper, 3rd Earl of Shaftesbury, circulated a manuscript proposing a new British style of architecture. Shaftesbury censured Wren's cathedral, his taste and his long-standing control of royal works. Although Wren was appointed to the 50 New Churches Commission in 1711, he was left only with nominal charge of a board of works when the surveyorship started in 1715. On the 26th of April 1718, on the pretext of failing powers, he was dismissed in favour of William Benson. Death. The Wren family estate was at the old courthouse in the area of Hampton Court. He had been given a lease on the property by Queen Anne in lieu of salary arrears for building St. Paul's. For convenience, Wren also leased a house on St. James's Street in London. According to a 19th-century legend, he would often go to London to pay unofficial visits to St. Paul's, to check on the progress of migrator's work. On one of these trips to London, at the age of 90, he caught a chill which worsened over the next few days. On the 25th of February 1723, a servant who tried to awaken Wren from his nap found that he had died. Wren was laid to rest on the 5th of March 1723. His remains were placed in the southeast corner of the crypt of St. Paul's beside those of his daughter Jane, his sister Susan Holder, and her husband William. The plain stone plaque was written by Wren's eldest son and heir, Christopher Wren, Jr. The inscription, which is also inscribed in a circle of black marble on the main floor beneath the center of the dome, reads, which translates from Latin as, his obituary was published in the Post, Boy No. 5244 London, 2 March 1723. Sir Christopher Wren, who died on Monday last in the 91st year of his age, was the only son of Dr. Chr. Wren, Dean of Windsor and Wolverhampton, Registrar of the Garter, younger brother of Dr. Matthew Wren LDBP of Ely, a branch of the ancient family of Wrens of Binchester in the Bishopric of Durham 1653, elected from Wadham into Fellowship of All Souls 1657. Professor of Astronomy, Gresham College, London 1660. Civilian Professor, Oxford after 1666. Surveyor General for rebuilding the Cathedral Church of St. Paul and the parochial churches and all other public buildings which he lived to finish. 1669. Surveyor General till April 26. 1718-1680. President of the Royal Society 1698. Surveyor General and Sub-Commissioner for Repairs to Westminster Abbey by Act of Parliament, continued till death. His body is to be deposited in the Great Vault under the dome of the Cathedral of St. Paul. Scientific career. One of Wren's friends, another great scientist and architect and a fellow Westminster schoolboy, Robert Hooke, said of him, since the time of Archimedes there scarce ever met in one man in so great perfection such a mechanical hand and so philosophical mind. When a fellow of All Souls, Wren constructed a transparent beehive for scientific observation. He began observing the moon, which was to lead to the invention of micrometers for the telescope. He experimented on terrestrial magnetism and had taken part in medical experiments while at Wadham College, performing the first successful injection of a substance into the bloodstream. In Gresham College, he did experiments involving determining longitude through magnetic variation and through lunar observation to help with navigation, and helped construct a 35-foot telescope with Sir Paul Neal. Wren also studied and improved the microscope and telescope at this time. He had also been making observations of the planet Saturn from around 1652 with the aim of explaining its appearance. His hypothesis was written up in De Corpore Saturni, but before the work was published, Huygens presented his theory of the rings of Saturn. Immediately Wren recognized this as a better hypothesis than his own, and De Corpore Saturni was never published. In addition, he constructed an exquisitely detailed lunar model and presented it to the king. Also, his contribution to mathematics should be noted. In 1658, he found the length of an arc of the cycloid using an exhaustion proof based on dissections to reduce the problem to summing segments of chords of a circle which are in geometric progression. A year into Wren's appointment as a civilian professor in Oxford, the Royal Society was created and Wren became an active member. As civilian professor, Wren studied mechanics thoroughly, especially elastic collisions and pendulum motions. He also directed his far-ranging intelligence to the study of meteorology. In 1662 he invented the tipping bucket rain gauge and, in 1663, designed a weather clock that would record temperature, humidity, rainfall and barometric pressure. A working weather clock based on Wren's design was completed by Robert Hooke in 1679. In addition, Wren experimented on muscle functionality, hypothesizing that the swelling and shrinking of muscles might proceed from a fermentative motion arising from the mixture of two heterogeneous fluids. Although this is incorrect, it was at least founded upon observation and may mark a new outlook on medicine. Specialization. Another topic to which Wren contributed was optics. He published a description of an engine to create perspective drawings, and he discussed the grinding of conical lenses and mirrors. Out of this work came another of Wren's important mathematical results, namely that the hyperboloid of revolution is a ruled surface. These results were published in 1669. In subsequent years, Wren continued with his work with the Royal Society, although after the 1680s his scientific interest seemed to have waned. No doubt his architectural and official duties absorbed more time. It was a problem posed by Wren that serves as an ultimate source to the conception of Newton's Principia Mathematica Philosophiae Naturalis. Robert Hooke had theorized that planets, moving in vacuo, describe orbits around the Sun because of a rectilinear inertial motion by the tangent and an accelerated motion towards the Sun. Wren's challenge to Halley and Hooke, for the reward of a book worth 30 shillings, was to provide, within the context of Hooke's hypothesis, a mathematical theory linking the Kepler's laws with a specific force law. Halley took the problem to Newton for advice, prompting the latter to write a 9-page answer, De Motu Corporum in Gyrum, which was later to be expanded into the Principia. Mentioned above are only a few of Wren's scientific works. He also studied other areas, ranging from agriculture, ballistics, water and freezing, light and refraction, to name only a few. Thomas Birch's History of the Royal Society is one of the most important sources of our knowledge not only of the origins of the Society, but also the day-to-day running of the Society. It is in these records that most of Wren's known scientific works are recorded.